She has taught she currently serves as Executive Director of the Southern California Hospice Foundation, a non-profit organization committed to enhancing the lives of terminally ill patients and their families. We welcome Michelle to our conference. Her topic is The Unexpected Journey, Finding Living Your Deeper Purpose. Welcome you.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing today?
Great.
Awesome. I am so blessed to be here today to share my personal health journey and how it led to one of the greatest privileges that I have ever known. Let's see if I can figure out this clicker. Maybe I can just do it. There we go. Okay. So, believe it or not, I am a 2-time stroke survivor. I am 37 years old, and I had my first stroke at the age of 11 due to a rare congenital deformity that I was born with, known as an arterial venous malformation, which is abbreviated AVM. An AVM is a tangle of blood vessels and arteries in the brain that lack the capillaries in between to slow the blood flow. So imagine a giant ball of twine that is all tangled up with no beginning and no end. And now imagine that tangle in your brain. And that's what my AVM was. It was in my brain, and at the time, it was the largest ever recorded in history. Most AVMs are the size of a dime to about the size of a quarter, but mine was the size of a sausage and went vertically through 3 different lobes in my brain. Through the motor strip on the left side, which controls right-sided movement, through the parietal lobe, which controls language and speech, and through the occipital lobe, which controls vision. And so I was a perfectly normal, healthy child up until the age of 11 when I started to have the worst headache of my entire life. It felt like sledgehammers were pounding into both sides of my skull, rhythmically at the same time. And I was sleeping, and I tried to call for my mom, and I tried to call for my sister, but they didn't hear me. And I passed back out into my pillow until my mom came to wake me up for the school. She thought I had the flu. I was vomiting, I had severe nausea, a stiff back, stiff neck, and 5 days later she realized that I was terribly sick and took me to the ER, and that's where they discovered the scan. And it's hard to see because it's an old scan, but toward the top, it's like it kind of looks like you see that big feeder vein, and it's kind of at the top there, and that was my AVM. So the doctors told my family that it was too large to operate on. We couldn't surgically remove it. And so the proper course of treatment was to have 3 radiation treatments scheduled over the course of the next 3 years. So a month later, I went through my first radiation treatment in 1994. I was completely traumatized and unprepared for what would happen. My mom told me I would only have to stay in the hospital for 1 night, and that I would be able to eat as much ice cream as I wanted. And I loved ice cream, so I was all in. When I got there, the doctors and neurosurgeons proceeded to screw this 8-pound helmet into 4 sides of my skull. And so they numbed these 4 different points in my head, and they took out what I thought was an electric screwdriver and started screwing this helmet to my skull. And so I was terrified and obviously kicking and screaming. I had to wear that helmet for 8 hours, and the actual procedure of the radiation only took 10 minutes. And the reason why is because the neurosurgeons had to get the exact coordinates right of where they shot the radiation, or else it could cause catastrophic damage. So with this type of radiation, it takes 6 months to 3 years for results to show. 6 months later, I started having drop foot on my right side. And I thought I had maybe heard it when I was playing, and then all of a sudden my leg went completely dead. I had feeling, but I couldn't move it, couldn't pick up my foot, couldn't run, and then 2 months later, my right arm went out completely as well. So all of a sudden, there I was, 12 years old, completely handicapped with full right side paralysis. I never had the facial drooping, but I had no use of my right arm, no use of my right leg. And so I went from being the most popular girl in class to someone who was made fun of, who didn't have any friends, and just trying to cope with this new reality of being disabled. And I had to learn how to write with my left hand, how to button my pants, tie my shoes with one hand, and all of the activities of daily living that we take for granted. But kids are resilient, right? They have just like this amazing fire inside of them. And so I was able to learn how to walk without a leg brace, although I still had a limp, and I never did regain use of my right side. A year later, I went through my second treatment of radiation, and luckily that didn't cause any negative side effects. And when I was about 13 or 14 years old, the doctor had said that my AVM had shrunk, and it was now the size of a dime, which is a normal size of an AVM. But it was so deep in the brain that if they operated, I would not make it off the operating table. And if I had another treatment of radiation, it would likely compromise my ability to speak or understand language. Now, what is the most important thing to a teenage girl? Yes, talking on the phone, hanging out with friends, communicating, and having that social life. And so I told the doctor, there is no way I'm going to go through that third treatment of radiation and risk becoming more disabled than I already am. He said, okay, Michelle, well, you know, if you don't go through that radiation treatment, you're not going to live to be 30 years old. I said, well, Doc, 30 is a long way away. And so I chose to live every day to the fullest, knowing that I had a limited life expectancy. And so I tried out for volleyball in high school, and I played volleyball for all 4 years, half paralyzed, and I would skip my way around the court, and I learned to serve with one hand. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was the varsity volleyball captain and the most enthusiastic bench warmer in all of the league. Yes. I then went on to college. I traveled all over the world. I climbed the Great Wall of China. I saw the Taj Mahal. I heard Fidel Castro speak in Cuba. I did service projects for children who had been orphaned to AIDS. And when I returned from my trip abroad, I learned mostly that, oh my gosh, there were these moments in time where I felt, God, why me? Why would you do this to me? What have I done to deserve this? But then when I came back from this trip where I saw third world countries where they had no access to clean water, lack of nutrition, medicine, and I felt, before maybe I had been cheated somehow, and then I came back and I felt like I had been incredibly blessed. Because here I live in America where I have all of these amazing resources to medicine. I could go to the grocery store, I could buy any food off of the shelf. I have my parents, I'm not struggling with major illnesses aside from my brain lesion. And I just felt like, God just called me and he said, you have to serve. And I had no idea what that looked like, but I knew I was here to serve. I knew I had a purpose. And so, coming back from this study abroad trip, I was a senior in college, and I took a death and dying class. And a part of the assignment was to volunteer for hospice. And so I was randomly assigned to a patient who had also had a stroke. But unlike me, she was 84 years old. She was completely bedbound because she was paralyzed on one side, couldn't walk, and she suffered from severe aphasia, or difficulty speaking, had very slurred speech. And when I shared with her that I had also had a stroke, we immediately formed a bond, one that transcended age and time. And I asked her, what was the one thing that you loved to do before you got sick? She said, I love to read, but I can't see anymore because the stroke affected my vision. I said, okay, why don't we start a book club, just me and you? And I would go and I would read to her once a week about great women in America, and I found out that this woman earned her master's degree in the 1930s, before women were even educated, that she had traveled all over the world, that she married the superintendent of her kid's school and became a teacher. And I knew her car, the salesman of who sold her first car, taught her how to drive in the parking lot, and her door burnt down when she was a freshman in college. And so I would visit her, and then every week for 2 months, and then I got a phone call that she had passed away, and that one of her sons wanted me to give the eulogy at the funeral. So there I was, 21 years old, giving a eulogy about a woman who I had only known for 2 short months. And afterwards, one of her sons came up to me. She had 4 sons who all lived in the same neighborhood. And he said to me, there were things about my mom that you said in that eulogy that I never knew because I never took the time to ask. And I thought, wow, what does this say about how we treat our family, how we treat the sick, how we treat the disabled, how we treat the dying? And our comfort level, even within our own family, to be able to talk about things when someone's disabled, or to hold their hand, or to be present in the moment. And I just knew at that moment, God just spoke to me and said, you are supposed to be in hospice. And I desperately began searching for positions in hospice, and I've been in hospice ever since. So, funny story, this is a God story, but rewind a little bit, and we were in class, and the professor announces that there's 2 students whose patients have both been asked to give the eulogy, and I knew I was one of them, and my eyes scanned the room, and they met the cute guy in the back, and his name was Steven, and I was like, oh gosh, it's him. He waited for me after class, and 6 months later, he proposed. And so, we're still married, we're going on 15 years next year, yeah? And I thought, oh my gosh, I wish I could comfort her, I wish I could ask her what's wrong, but I don't feel good, I feel like I'm gonna pass out. And then I quickly learned what was wrong when the manager stormed out from behind closed doors and started screaming at her in front of all the customers for a mistake that she made. And here I was earning my degree in organizational leadership, and I thought, what kind of leader am I not to say anything to this manager? But I don't feel good, and I feel like I'm gonna pass out. So I got in the car, it was pouring down rain. I remember looking down the street at the hospital and thinking, should I go to the hospital or should I go home? And I said, no, I'm tired, I'm working full time, I'm going to school full time, I just need to go home. And as I was driving, the rain pelted on the window, and it reminded me of the sledgehammers that were pounding inside my skull many years earlier. I pulled the driveway, my husband asked, how was it? And I said, this manager was horrible, got on the computer, found the number to Kinko's corporate headquarters, filed a complaint against the manager, sat down on my couch, and started going in and out of consciousness. My husband knew I had this lesion, and he immediately put me in the car and started taking me to the hospital. And 3 months earlier, they had just built a fire station, and he knew I wasn't going to make it to the hospital. So he pulled into the fire station, ran to the front door, and said, I think my wife's having a stroke. She has an AVM. And the last thing I remember was the paramedic over both of my shoulders saying, Michelle, stay with me. Stay with me, Michelle. And I remember thinking, I can't hang on anymore. This is it. I have to go. And so I went. And I was completely surrounded by God. There was this beautiful, warm, loving light that just infused my soul. And I felt like this healing hum that reverberated through my body. And I just knew that this is the place I had come from, and this is where I now belonged. And then there was silence for a bit, and then I started to hear prayers. And at first they were the prayers of my loved ones, of my husband, my sister, my mom, asking for healing, asking for a miracle to save me. And then I heard what I believe were prayers being lifted up in every language for everything we ask God to do. We ask for healing, we ask for love, for forgiveness, for redemption, for hope. And then I heard a voice. And these prayers got louder and louder and louder, and they were all around me. And then I heard a voice saying, in the name of Jesus, let her be healed. And I knew that this lesion was gone. And I didn't want to leave because it was so beautiful, and it was so at peace, and it was wonderful. said, but I am with you always. And I thought, ah, fine. So anyways, let me back up a little bit. By the time I arrived at the hospital, I was in the deepest level of coma before you die. There is something called a Glasgow Coma Scale, and it's a scale, a 15-point scale that rates your overall level of consciousness when you're in a coma. And to put it in perspective, if you are an organ donor and you want to donate your organs, Donate Life is contacted when you are a level 5. A level 3 is, there is no such thing as 2 or 1 or 0, but a level 3 is basically brain dead with minimal brainstem activity with no chance of meaningful recovery. When I arrived at the hospital, I was a level 3. Basically brain dead, minimal brainstem activity only. So my husband, oh thank you, my husband, they told the doctor what had happened, or the doctors told my husband what had happened, and he prayed over me before I went into the operating room, signed the consents for the surgery, and off I went. A couple hours later, the doctor emerged, and he was very sad and without hope. And he told my family, I don't know if she's going to make it through the night, and if she does, we don't know if she'll ever wake up. And my mom said, well, what can we expect if she does wake up? He said, if she does wake up, she won't be able to talk, walk, or see. So that was my prognosis, that I would be in a permanent vegetative state if I ever did wake up. And so the doctors were encouraging my husband to take me off life support, but my husband refused to give up. He said, no, I'm not gonna lose my bride, she's coming back. And so everyone thought he was crazy. Donate Life was ready to harvest my organs. My best friend wrote my eulogy. My whole family had known all of my life that I was gonna die. But here's this guy I've been married to for 2 years. It's like, no, she's coming back. It kind of led to a little bit of chaos in the family, but I'm glad that we made the right decision. For 8 days, I was in this coma. For 8 days, I was surrounded by this warm, loving light. And it's often debated, can my loved one or can my patients hear me when they're in a coma? And I want to say that personally, while I was in my coma, I could hear everything. I could hear the doctors doing neurotalk checks, saying, Michelle, if you can hear me, open your eyes. If you can hear me, squeeze my hand. And I remember trying to open my eyes and trying to squeeze their hand, but my eyelids felt like they were made of thick steel, and I couldn't move, no matter how hard I tried. But I wasn't frustrated. I wasn't trapped in my body, because I was completely surrounded by God, and it was the most beautiful feeling. I remember my mom coming in, and she was reading cards to me, and she read a card from someone that I particularly cared about, and a tear rolled down my cheek, and my mom started screaming and said, oh my gosh, she can hear me, she can hear me. And the nurse ran in, and they said, oh no, she can't hear you, she's just in pain. And they upped my morphine. So there came a point where the doctors came in, and one of the doctors came in, and I heard all of this, and he said, you can't be on life support for longer than 7 days. And so tomorrow is day 7. We're going to have to put a tracheotomy in her tomorrow. And my husband says, I don't think you should. I think she's going to wake up. And the doctor said, she's not going to wake up. I'm sorry, it doesn't look like it's going in that direction. And so then my husband said, okay, fine. The doctor left, and my husband gripped my hand and was like, Michelle, you have to open your eyes. You have to open your eyes. You don't want to trach. Please open your eyes. I remember trying to open my eyes. I couldn't move them. I couldn't do it no matter how hard I tried. The next day, the doctor comes in and says, the operating room is slammed, and we have to postpone surgery until Monday. So my husband's like, yes. And so again, he's holding my hand, he's praying with me, he's asking God to help him open my eyes. And again, I'm trying to open my eyes and I can't. And the next day, my husband's begging me, praying for me to open my eyes, And it took all of my strength, but finally my eyes fluttered open. He starts screaming, goes around to get nurses, and I was able to open my eyes and keep them opened. So that was really incredible. So this is after I woke up. That's my wonderful husband right there. That's me. And I look pretty good, don't I? Like, I'm smiling. I look like I have this glow. But this is what my brain looked like. And as you can see, there was massive damage to one side, to where that side of my brain is pretty much scar tissue. And so the road to recovery was very, very difficult. I had to learn how to live again. I had to learn how to walk. I had to learn how to talk. I had to learn how to go to the bathroom, how to feed myself, how to do everything. I remember when I first woke up, the stroke had paralyzed my vocal cords. So when my vocal cords did come together, it only sounded like a breathy whisper. So I had no projection in my voice. The only word I knew how to say was yes. That was it, the only word I had in my vocabulary. But I had this moment after I was discharged from the hospital, where I had a hospital bed in my living room, as you can see. I had on a catheter. I couldn't count past 10. I barely knew my own name. I was just so vulnerable and so weak and felt so isolated. And I remember looking out the window and seeing grass and life and dog walkers and just kind of feeling like, oh, I had this amazing job, I have a wonderful husband, and now I'm like an infant. I can't do anything. And then I would have someone come over and pray with me, or someone come and hold my hand, or someone come and just be present. And I had this amazing moment where I thought, oh my goodness, this is what my hospice patients must feel like. Weak, wounded, vulnerable, anxious, bedbound. But then to have someone come and just be present, and that's what the gift of presence does. When someone is so weak and so wounded, having that loving presence and prayer was one of really the only things that comforted me. And so I like to share that story. And this computer here, my husband put the computer in front of me. This is before iPads or iPhones or anything. And he told me to start typing, and I started pushing the buttons on the screen. I literally had no idea how to do anything at all. But God is so good, because 5 months later after that, I actually graduated with my master's degree, and I walked across the stage to receive my degree, even though I was in a wheelchair at the time. And so my husband is pushing me in the wheelchair, and they get ready to put me on the lift, and I told the lady to stop, but I couldn't really talk because my voice was a whisper, so I said, stop. And she leaned in and said, what did she say? And my husband said, she said to stop. And she said, okay. And I said, I'm walking. And my husband says, she's walking. So he went and grabbed 2 of the biggest guys you could find in the lineup. They hoisted me up the steps, and across the stage I walked to receive my master's degree, and I never got back in a wheelchair again. I have written a book called All We Have Is Today. There are copies on the back there, and this is what it looks like. Oopsie daisy. So I typed this book with one hand and a damaged brain, and typing it was an act of obedience to God. And I knew that I had a story to tell, and I knew it would help other people. And so I had no idea really how to write, had to learn how to do all that over. Started journaling, then I took classes at the local senior center. The teacher read it and said, wow, this is really good. You should think about publishing it. And I was like, well, how do you publish it? You need an agent. Well, how do you get an agent? Well, you have to write query letters. So I wrote query letters, and I probably sent out 300 query letters all over the nation. Got rejection after rejection letter, but I got one yes. And it's gone, I typed with one hand, damaged brain, and it's gone on to win 3 National Gold Medal Book Awards. And it's really a testimony. It's a testimony of God's goodness, of how He lets our trials become our testimony, if we just allow Him to. And, you know, it's a story of hope, faith, and love, but above all, it's a story that demonstrates that the divine lives within each of us. The Holy Spirit is within each of us. And so, I know that there is something eternal in us all. I love this saying. I don't know where it came from. I don't know who wrote it. But it says, maybe life isn't about avoiding the bruises. Maybe it's about collecting the scars to prove that we showed up for it. So I have a scar in my head that goes all the way down from the top of my head here to the back of my skull. Luckily I have a lot of hair, so that's good. But what's your unexpected journey? Maybe it's the death of a loved one. Maybe it's the loss of a job. Maybe it's children who seem to be going down the wrong path. Maybe you're just feeling empty and you're searching for your life's purpose, or maybe you know somebody who is. But no matter what you're going through, I want to encourage you to share your story, to reach out to other people, because I believe that we can't live a great life inside of our own comfort zone. We have to be brave, we have to be bold, and we have to just go for it. Just go for it. And just become all that you're created to be. So thank you so much for having me. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think I have a few minutes. Oh, sure.
Have you ever thought or explored the possibility of putting what you just did on the DVD? You could have a marvelous impact.
Oh, thank you. He asked, have I ever thought about putting this on a DVD and would have a good impact? I think people have recorded me in the past, and I think there maybe is a YouTube channel, but that's a great idea. I haven't thought about that. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes.
Have you ever been told that you have a glow around you when you speak?
Yes. She asked, have you ever been told you have a glow around you when you speak? Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Michelle,
Yes.
can you give an example or two of what you're doing today, what happened?
You mean with Kelsey, is that who you're thinking of?
I'm thinking of the Make-A-Wish.
Yeah. So I worked with Elaine for many, many years, and she's a hospice chaplain, and she's been involved with helping to grant many patient requests through, we have an angel assistance program. And that's where any member of the hospice team can submit an application to our organization to request for anything that a family or a patient might need. So I worked with Elaine. We had one patient who was a singer, and he wanted to have a song professionally recorded. And so we arranged for, he lived in a nursing facility, we arranged for a transport van to pick him up, we arranged for him to have his song professionally recorded, and we put it on a DVD for him, and he felt so good about that because that was his dying wish. And the song was Don't Give Up. And here he was, terminally ill, and he was singing Don't Give Up. And so it was beautiful. We like recently, my most recent request, I worked with a woman who's 24 years old with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she has a favorite band that I had never heard of before called 5 Seconds of Summer. I guess they're really popular right now on the cover of Rolling Stones magazine, and they're huge, and she wanted to meet them before she died. And so I reached out, and I didn't hear anything back until about 2 weeks ago. Got a phone call from their publicist that said they're back in the US for being on tour, and they'd like to invite Kelsey and her friends down to a private rehearsal. And so we arranged for a limousine to come pick up the girls and take them up to Burbank, and then the whole band, they basically gave her their own private performance where she was able to request any song that she wanted. They made sure all of her favorite snacks were there, And when they were done, the lead guitarist was playing his Gibson guitar. He took his guitar off of his chest, handed it to this girl, and he said, "Do you want this?" And she said, "Are you sure?" And he basically had everyone in the entire band sign his Gibson guitar, and he gave that to her as a gift. And so it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. We also just worked with a patient that, she was turning, I think, 100 years old, and she had another friend in the facility who was 65 years old, and they wanted to have a mariachi band and a joint birthday party. So we got a mariachi band to come down and catered it with, a taco truck. And so we do kind of fun things. We also have a lot of patients that need, basic things like grocery gift cards, payment of utility bills. Patients are on continuous oxygen and they have no money to pay that bill because their electricity bill is so high. Or we have a patient that's living out in Riverside with 110-degree heat in a single-wide mobile home, and they don't have any air conditioning. And so we'll arrange to purchase a portable air conditioning unit to get that for them. We had another patient that lived out in Paris. She lived in a single-wide mobile home, and because she was in a wheelchair, there were stairs going up to the top of her trailer, and she hadn't been outside in 3.5 years. And so she would go sit at the edge of her door and look outside, and other than that, she couldn't go because she was in a wheelchair. And so we installed a wheelchair ramp for her, and she was able to go outside and feel the breeze and feel the warm air around her. And so that's kind of what I've been up to lately and how God has used me to serve. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
Were you in a coma when you were in heaven?
I believe so. Yeah, I never was actually, I never flatlined, so I was never actually brain dead. I just had minimal brainstem activity. But I believe it was either the place you go before heaven or heaven, because I didn't see any images of people. So I know some accounts, they say that they see people, they see their loved ones who have passed on. I couldn't see anything other than light. It was a warm, not bright white, a warm glow, but I felt this warmth and this vibrating. And I heard prayers in every language lifted up to God. Yeah. Yes.
I just want to say your story is amazing.
Oh.
It's really invigorating.
Oh, thank you.
But I did hospice for about a year. You do hear where they, people transit, that crying down, go back and forth.
Yeah, I know I was teetering because I know I did not want to go back. And I remember just having, not vocally, but having a conversation, I believe with God, saying I don't want to go back. And then just knowing but I am with you always. And it was just so reassuring that, I have no doubt, every day He's with me. And so since I've woken up, my relationship with God is on a whole new level. It's there is no doubt that He exists, that He loves me, that He's working through me, and that He, just cradles me, and He just lifts me up, and really, truly, God loves each of us so much that we can't even imagine how much He loves us.
So your story tells that all.
Yeah.
We not to see that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for doing that.
Of course. Is there a question back here?
Well, I was going to ask, what is I can't even imagine what your quiet time is like today, but you can't get through it without.
Yeah. She asked, what's my quiet time like? Can't get through without crying. It's true because every morning, so since I've woken up from the coma, I've read the Bible all the way through twice, from beginning to end. And I just have to be caught every day in His Word. And so I have a routine in the morning, before my daughter wakes up or anybody gets up, there's any chaos, and I just read a chapter from the Bible, and then I journal, and I literally write letters to God. Like, then that's kind of how I have a conversation with him, is just write letters. And it's really just a prayer journal of all of the prayers, all of my hopes, my fears, whatever I'm going through, and every day I just pray that God will be present in me, and that people will know that He is good, and so it's really amazing just to see how every day, in some small way, God shows up. Right. So the question was, for those on the other side of the room, how would I encourage people who are professionals that maybe have a patient that they're walking through that shadow, and we don't know what the outcome's going to be. There will be a healing, or there will be, toward something that's death, And I would just encourage you to be present and to touch their hand and to say, I'm so sorry, but please know we're here for you. And I mean, you don't want to give false hope, for sure. You don't want to say, and if you're a chaplain, obviously pray with them. But if you're a nurse and that's not really your role, you can definitely just be present, give them that gift. And I have been called back to the bedsides of patients that were in hospice but were in a coma, and because they heard my story and it gave them hope that maybe if I went to the family and went to meet with that patient, that maybe they would be healed. And it's like I know. That's happened to me several times. Each time, I instantly know that they weren't going to come out of it. It was just a feeling of knowing. So since I woken up from the coma, I had very good intuition. And I just knew that in this last instance, that this woman wasn't going to come out. But I prayed with the family, and I let them know that it's going to be okay. Because even if she doesn't come out of it, she's going to a much better place than we have here. And I'm able to share that story of how I had the light and the prayers, and it was no pain. And so that's comforting people too, because the reality of it is all of us are going to face our end, right? And so all that matters really is how we live each day, how we treat the people around us, how we interact with people, how we make them feel. There's that old saying that people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. So I think as we continue in our work, whenever we do, that we make sure to just remember that, because for each of us, we're going to go to the other side someday. Yeah? Good question. Yes?
I have one question that's kind of personal, but you said you have a daughter. Did
Yeah.
you have her naturally, or?
We adopted her. We adopted a daughter from foster care. So, yeah. It's amazing because we started the adoption process in June of 2011. And we got her in, I think, November of 2015. We got her basically 4.5 years after we had started the adoption process. So the amazing thing is that she was born the same month and the same year that we started the adoption process. So it's like God had been holding her and carrying her from the moment we started the adoption process till when we got her, 4.5 years later. So she's amazing. She's 8. She just started 3rd grade yesterday. So, yes.
This is kind of more curiosity to all of you, what we'd like to know with your husband, what tenacity and what strength and what, can you say anything about how you truly was feeling at this time? Did you just share that?
Yeah, no, he just said, he just knew that I was going to get better. And so anytime any doctor came to give advanced directives, he would take it in his hand and crumple it and throw it in the trash. Like he slept in my hospital bed, or he slept in my hospital room in a tiny little cot next to my bed every single day. He was my advocate. He would fight for me when the doctors, when I first came out of the coma, I was having a horrible reaction to the drugs. I was shaking uncontrollably. I was having hallucinations. I thought the purple people were coming to eat me. It was awful. And so my husband really advocated, because I went for 5 days without any sleep, and he finally got the anesthesiologist to come and switch my medication, and when he did, I slept for 3 days. But he really advocated for me every step of the way, but he also has extreme faith. He's a very strong, like, Christian man, and so he just knew, like, I was going to be okay, and he fought for that. So, yeah, yes.
Can you tell us any more about the prayers that you heard? That's
So,
how that affected you,
yes.
or your view of God and prayer.
Right. So, my view of God in prayer, I know that God hears every single one of our prayers, even if it's spoken out loud or inside of our own hearts. But at the beginning, they were the prayers of, like, my husband saying, you know, please, dear God, heal her body, give her a miraculous healing. My sister and my mom, same thing. And then there were prayers, like, in every language being lifted up to God. And so what I remember, hearing pieces of the Lord's Prayer over and over again, and just feeling that, like, I heard a lot of tongues, and feeling God's presence so profoundly. Like, the words were like, not music, but the words were almost like lifting me up. Like, it was almost like I felt like it was wind almost. Like, you could feel the prayers, like wind going through you. And I felt this warmth as if it were warm sheets out of the dryer. You know how when you take the clothes out of the dryer, the sheets, you're like, and then cats come and just cuddle with them. That's how I felt, just like surrounded by this warm, loving God. So it was incredible.
Yeah. Thank you so much.